Hi, everyone. This is Jennifer Janechek, Director of Content Strategy for Sound Wisdom. And I'm so excited to have on the Sound Wisdom podcast today a guest, an author, Eliz Greene, who is a keynote speaker and worksite wellness consultant, and also the author of this new fabulous book, Stress Proof Your Life, which releases February 2nd. Of this year. So we're super excited about this release. And we'll be talking today about stress management techniques. Eliz has quite the journey. She had a heart attack at the age of 35 while 7 months pregnant with twins. And for the past 20 years or so has been researching, wellness strategies and heart health and presenting speeches and workshops and doing amazing work with the American Heart Association. So thank you so much, Eliz, for being here to share with us how we can become immune to stress, which wouldn't that be lovely?
It is lovely. And I thank you for that wonderful introduction. And I couldn't be more delighted to be here.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So I have to start with a statistic that was really staggering to me when I read your book. You said job stress has now overtaken smoking as the primary cause of preventable death in the United States. Right. And I just want to let that sink in for a moment because that's pretty significant. I mean, we are literally killing ourselves with stress. But, go ahead.
Well, and particularly my favorite people in the world are those managers that are sort of sandwiched in between delivering what people above them need to happen and managing their team. Mm-hmm. Those are the people that are particularly likely to sort of mortgage their own health for the success of their team. And it's a dangerous game.
Mortgage your own health for the sake of your team. That's really powerful. And I definitely want to talk about the connections with leadership. But in your book, you claim that most stress management solutions address the wrong problem. And so I was wondering if you could start by sharing a bit about why they're addressing the wrong problem. What should we be focusing on?
So as you mentioned, I have been on this new career for about 20 years now. My heart attack really did launch me into using my wacky story to encourage other people to pay attention to their health. And when I started, that focus was really on heart health and particularly women's heart health. But as we went along, I became more and more interested in stress. Stress is one of the major risk factors for heart disease, but it's also the one we understand the least and probably address the least. I spent a lot of time early in my career making sure that the advice that I was giving about heart health was based in data, based in research, but I wasn't able to find that same sort of data on the stress side. And I didn't want to just say, oh, you should do this without having anything to back it up. Mm-hmm. So I launched a job stress study. And really what I was looking for was, how do we quantify what work-life balance looks like, particularly in women? That's what I went looking for, because you can't solve a problem unless you know what it is. What I was surprised to discover was work-life balance isn't the top stressor. The thing that most of the people in my study reported as their top stressor, it's something else. So if all of our strategies to address stress are focused on this idea of work-life balance, we are solving the wrong problem. What I discovered is overwhelm and uncertainty are the top stressors for almost everybody in my study.
That's so interesting because, I mean, as a working mother, I can definitely say that I've always had this elusive ideal of work-life balance, right? Like if I just achieve work-life balance, I will be stressed out. But you're right. When I started doing the activities in the book, I recognized that, it is overwhelm and uncertainty, these less tangible, entities that are affecting me, more so than, it's not really a time management
No, it is
issue.
not a time management problem. Now, we can certainly spend our time in ways that don't support what's most important to us.
Mm-hmm.
That can be stressful. when we feel like we're not getting a good deal for the time and energy and attention that we spend on something, that can be stressful, but that's not a work-life balance problem. That's a overwhelm problem or an uncertainty problem, or we just don't like what we're doing problem.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a lot of us right now in this past year have been thrown into a state of both overwhelm and uncertainty. And I think most people would probably resonate with the experience of feeling just a generalized sense of stress, but not really knowing, not really being able to put their finger on what is causing the stress. So for people like that who just feel really overwhelmed, feel, just so much pressure, but don't know what to do and don't know where it's coming from, what would be, the first sort of step into sorting through it that you would recommend?
Well, there's a couple of things that I would suggest. First, recognizing what stress is, and then taking steps to actually sort of short circuit it and make your body feel better. So first, let's talk about what happens when you feel stress. So let's imagine we're driving down the highway and a car comes on one of those on-ramps and is not paying attention and is going to cut you off. That creates a stress reaction in your body. You think, oh my gosh, I'm going to get in a car accident. Cortisol, the stress hormone, floods our body. It does some really interesting things. It makes our heart rate goes up, makes our blood pressure goes up. It even makes our blood stickier. So if we are in that car accident, we may not bleed to death. All of those good things if we are potentially going to get in a car accident. But it also allows you to think a little quicker, react a little quicker. It's this hardwired reaction to stress. But when we are able to then get over to the left lane, get around them, the stressor goes away, that cortisol level is supposed to come back down. And along with it, our heart rate and our blood pressure and the stickiness of our blood. Because when you think about it, none of us need higher blood pressure or stickier blood. That's not good for us, which is why stress has that risk factor relationship with heart disease. So when we need it, it's supposed to go up. When we don't need it, it's supposed to come back down to normal. The problem is when we live up here all the time, it doesn't get a chance to come back down and we can't recover from that stress. And what's particularly difficult about things like uncertainty, it's not that car that's cutting you off. It doesn't go away. It is there all of the time. So we need to actively tell our bodies to let go of that cortisol. And one of the things I find really interesting about stress is your body doesn't know the difference between that car cutting you off and a surprise birthday party. Same reaction. So stress isn't good or bad. It just is. But if you treat stress management as a hard skill, as things that you can actively do to make a difference, you can tell your body to let go of that.
That's so good. I love that, stress isn't good or bad. It just is. And we might spend so much time trying to, identify the stressors and, figure out what exactly is causing us problems. And, I'm sure that plays a role in it, the sort of preventative,
sure.
What can we do to better our lives? But, you're talking about recovery. So actively managing that stress is really, largely the key to becoming immune to it, because, as you get exposed, it's like being exposed to a pathogen, right? Like you're still going to be exposed to it.
Right.
The metaphor of the year that we could go on forever, right? But you can still be exposed to it, but not necessarily suffer from it.
Right. Exactly. You want to be able to withstand the stress in your environment you can't avoid. And for us, there's I know you have young children. That is stressful. And interesting, in my study, people with children, I'm going to guess they were probably 0 to 3 or high school seniors who said, yeah, caring for children is my top stressor, but only 7% of people said that. So it doesn't mean that caring for children isn't stressful. It just means for most people, that's not their top stressor.
Right.
But there's lots of things that we can't avoid. Maybe I was just working with a group where all of their money for the year is made in this 6-week window. That's stressful.
Yeah.
Right? That 6-week window is going to be crazy.
Yeah.
It just means we have to actively allow ourselves to recover from that stress so it doesn't build up and become a problem.
Yeah. So what would you recommend for somebody who suffers from acute stress, who's at the point where it is causing physical harm and psychological distress? Is there a different approach that somebody like that needs to take to their stress recovery?
I think the different approach is really recognizing when it starts to ramp up. Your cue about that may be different depending on who you are. It may be that you're feeling that heart rate rise, or maybe you get that sort of weird, cold, sweaty feeling, whatever, or the knot in your stomach or whatever it is. But it could also be staring into your computer screen and not being able to string together a sentence. Stress, when it's high and chronic like that, robs us of the ability to think critically and creatively. So if you are like, I can't string 4 words together, that may be an indication that your stress level is quite high. That's a cue to say, okay, what am I going to do to let my body know that it is time to bring that cortisol level down? And there's a number of things that I talk about in the book. I'm going to give you 2 because I think they're really valuable. The first one is anytime you can raise your heart rate, hold it up there for a few minutes and let it come back down, that is a clue to let that cortisol go. So it's why exercise is an antidote for stress. You're getting your heart rate up, it comes back down, cortisol goes with it. It's a very good thing. But there's all kinds of things that raise your heart rate. My team's not going to the Super Bowl. But if you're a football fan like me and you're standing on your feet in your living room, yelling at the screen as they go to the end zone, if that's the case and you sit back down after that and you feel that sort of like, that's it working for you. And it doesn't really work all that well if your team doesn't score and it doesn't go to the Super Bowl, but whatever, or you don't agree with the play call. But I digress. So that's a good one. Raising your heart rate, bringing it back down again is a good clue. The other clue is anytime we can change our breath. When we're stressed, we take short, shallow breaths. Anything we can do to lengthen and deepen them is a clue to your body that says, oh, it is time to let that cortisol go, which is why for some meditation works so well. Right? But there's lots of ways to change your breath. It's why laughter works. Watching a funny video. Here's my tip to you. If you're feeling that stress, Google pancakey wife. Waffly wife works too. It's just this delightful video. The bride has the most contagious laugh I've ever heard. And when I'm having a bad day, that's where I go. Singing is another great way to change your breath. So if you are the type of person who sings in the car or sings in the shower, great way to let your body know it's time to let go of the stress.
That's great. So raise your heart rate temporarily and change your breath. Those are 2. That's great. Thanks so much, Eliz. So a little bit of a different question, but one thing I was really struck by in your book was that it seemed like, you didn't say as much, but I'm extrapolating here. It seems like a midlife crisis in some ways can be considered a stress management problem because it's a sort of a plateau where we might feel like there's an uncertainty created by not knowing where we can go from here, not feeling like there's anywhere to go from here. And I just found that so fascinating. So I'd love for you to share, what somebody might do in this situation to help themselves deal with that uncertainty and recognize that it is a stress problem, if I'm extrapolating correctly.
No, you are completely correct. And I see this with highly capable, highly motivated people in particular. Let's take, for example, an attorney who has worked their way through high school, worked their way through college, worked their way through law school, always really achieving and working hard to get, because there's always the next thing. You got to do well in college so you can get into a good law school. Got to do well in law school so you can get a good job. Got to do well at your job as an associate to get to be a partner. You got to do well as a partner to get to senior partner. And you have all of these rungs. This is true for CPAs, anybody that has a certification process. There's all of these rungs. Well, eventually you reach the top rung. And then what?
Right.
Is how are you really marking your progress? I call them artifacts of growth or artifacts of progress, because it's why my husband liked scuba diving. There are all of these certifications you can earn scuba diving. It's a great hobby for someone who likes those rungs. Now, eventually he ran out of those too, so he needs to move on to something else. But if you are reaching that point in the career, and I think sometimes men are more likely to hit this sort of where's the next rung problem. Especially when you have placed a lot of value on achieving that next thing. And then you might even reach a monetary plateau where there's not much farther to go up. Then where are you placing that motivation and achievement that you've really valued for so long? So creating other rungs, other artifacts of growth, so that you can find something else to get that enjoyment and satisfaction out of. I also think it's why people really enjoy hobbies that are creating something that is finished. Because a lot of times we don't get to finish things, or we don't see the final end of something. But if you're going to build something in the workshop and you get to paint it and polish it and it looks beautiful and it sits over there and you're like, I did that. That is another way of having that next rung. It's something completed that you feel satisfaction over.
That's great. Yeah, I found that strategy so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing more about that. Another thing I wanted to touch on was that you write about vulnerability in your book, and I'm sure, we all feel so vulnerable right now with the pandemic still going on. How does vulnerability tie into stress, and what can we do to manage the vulnerability that we are experiencing right now?
So this is one that is personally difficult for me. And I will say I work all of the things in the book every day. I rely on different things depending on what I need, but these are strategies that I've used personally, and I've worked with other people over the years on. But I really need this one in particular. For highly capable people, the problem solvers in relationships, the I've got this, I've got your back people, when you reach a problem you can't solve, it is really, really hard. Because you're the doer, you're the problem solver, and now you don't have control over the situation, and it's very, very uncomfortable. And we are not used to that feeling of vulnerability, that feeling that I need to rely on other people, even though we are the people that other people rely on. That feeling is very uncomfortable. And the reaction to it is often anger. And that is uncomfortable. So you sort of have a double whammy uncomfortable. And I absolutely experienced this after my heart attack, where I needed to rely on other people because I just physically wasn't able to do things. And I would get so angry about things that did not matter. I would find myself very short with people on the phone, or, some sort of customer service issue that I would blow so out of proportion. There are people on the phone that I owe apologies to.
I've done it too.
Yeah, but that's the sort of thing to pay attention to. And one of the things I do is ask myself, am I really that upset about this? Like this, not this, but this thing that I'm now focused my anger on, is that actually what I'm upset about? Or am I upset because I am dealing with a problem that I can't solve? And that's what we've all been doing for almost a year now.
Right.
We are dealing with a problem we can't solve that is outside of our ability to influence in many ways. I mean, there are things that we can do to protect ourselves and our family from the pandemic, but I can't personally solve it. You can't personally solve it. And so those are the things that we sort of need to protect ourselves from. Make that barrier so that does not impact my health, my ability to get my job done, and my ability to enjoy my life.
Yeah. I really like the exercise you mentioned in your book. And by the way, in Stress Proof Your Life, there are so many really actionable exercises and prompts that you can go through to help you actively manage your stress. So definitely check out the book. But one in particular that I found really, really useful was when you mentioned writing out, the things that I can control in this situation, and and the things that I cannot, and really working on the things that I can control, because then you feel like you've built up some degree of control over that circumstance. So, I can wear masks when I'm out in public. I can wash my hands when I come home. These are the things I can control. And if I hold tight to that, that can increase my sense of well-being. When you were speaking, I was wondering a little bit about how much of, because I always attributed that state of emotional exhaustion that I would get to where I would start, being really angry at people, to burnout. How much of this is like burnout, or what is the relationship, do you think, between the sort of stress that you're describing and burnout? Are they one and the same thing, or are we redefining burnout here in any way? Is that I'm just wondering, because we hear about burnout nowadays.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the term burnout.
Okay.
Because I think, to me, it sounds like a finality that, oh, I'm burned out. I'm done. There's nothing I can do about it. Like,
yeah, extinguish the little flame.
Done. I think we can reach the point where we are consumed by the symptoms of our stress. We're not sleeping. It's affecting our appetite. It's affecting our sex drive. It's affecting our relationships. I think that's the problem, is when what you're experiencing in the things that you can't control are having such an impact. It makes you unable to do your job, unable to enjoy your life, and it is causing a problem in your relationships. That's, I think, a bigger problem than whatever the mythological burnout is.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talk about in the book is having a circle of support is really important. Having people that understand you and you're able to communicate with. And, some of us are talkers, that we need to talk in order to process our stress. That's me. Some of us need more contemplation time and quiet, and that's all fine. But at the end of the day, we all need to have people in our lives who really get us and can help us through those times when we're experiencing so much stress that it's impacting us negatively. There are times, however, that the people closest to you aren't the right people to help you. When you get to the point where that stress is causing you to drink or take drugs other than the drugs that are prescribed to you, or have thoughts of hurting yourself or hurting others, that's where somebody who is really trained to help you can be very, very instrumental in moving forward through that and working through that. And I know even now there is some stigma around getting help for mental health issues. There shouldn't be.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if we all talked about it, most of us have sought help for one reason or another over the years and have benefited for it. I know I have. And so the more we talk plainly about how that's important when we need it, I think it gives people permission to seek it. And one of the silver linings of this pandemic is it is so much easier to find help because we can do it like this.
Right.
You can meet with a therapist. You know, you don't even have to leave your house.
Yeah, definitely more accessible. Absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate that and get what you're saying, because it does feel like burnout sort of a nebulous concept that does have that finality to it, where we just say, I'm burned out. Well, where do you go from there then? You know, there doesn't feel like there's any directionality. So, you know, I really appreciate what you're saying there. Well, I only have time for one more question. So what I would like to do is save the leadership conversation, because I think there's so much, you know, so much we can go into with that for a future podcast, if that's okay with you. If you'd love
I would love that.
Come back, great. But I have to end on a note, a fun note. And I know the answer to this, but our audience probably doesn't. So it's a little bit of a underhand pitch. But are you a border collie or an iguana? What does that mean? And why does it matter?
Well, I am an iguana who can hang with the border collies when necessary. This is one of my favorite parts of the book. And it's really in a section talking about psychological stress and the ability to disconnect from the things that are causing us stress, especially when it's an uncertainty issue. It stays there, and we can sing and jump up and down and do all the strategies to tell our bodies to let go of that cortisol. But if it's still pumping in, it doesn't work as well. So it's really about, how am I going to shut that process off? So my husband is one of those highly capable, highly motivated people. And when we're on vacation, we have very active vacations. So he's go, go, go all of the time. And we were on vacation with a couple of other couples, and we were going all of the time until one of the gentlemen said, you know, you're go, go, go all the time. When are you going to relax? And my husband said, I am relaxed. If I don't have something to do, I'm like a border collie. I start chewing on things. And you know, it was one of those moments in a marriage where you just sort of go, oh, yeah. That's very true. And it's not that, you know, he's chewing on the furniture. He's chewing up here. He's thinking about what's in his inbox. He's thinking about that project that he delegated and whether or not it's going to be done the way he needs it to be done. He's chewing on things, which means he's constantly triggering that stress. But if he's occupied, he's not thinking about that other stuff, which is great. I am more toward the iguanas, as were the other couples we were with. And the reason that we call them iguanas is at this resort where we were, the pool was in a mangrove, and there were actually iguanas that would just sort of sun themselves around the pool. As our friends did, we started referring to them as iguanas. So if you are somebody who gets that disconnection through kind of quieter contemplative activities, reading your book, like I love to watch a sunset, like watching the sun goes down, just listening to the waves come in, particularly over water. That's a good combination for me. So it's not that one is better than the other. It's really recognizing what you personally need and then negotiating for it. when we're on vacation and we've been go, 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 my husband will often turn to me and said, we've had kind of a border collie day. Do you need a little iguana time? And I'm like, yes, that would be great. So it's really about recognizing what the people around you need too.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, it was interesting to me. There is a stress recovery personality quiz in this book. That's one of the resources provided, which is really fun to dive into and figure out what you are. And for me, it was sort of illuminating because I'm both a little bit. So on a daily basis, I'm a border collie. I'm a very high stress person. And so I have to have really high impact workouts to diffuse the stress on a day-to-day basis. But on vacation, I'm an iguana. It's like I hit a point and I just have to kind of like, lounge because it's just no more, I guess, cortisol left to flow through the body. But I don't know. But yeah, it is really interesting to think about because I am probably predominantly border collie. And so I appreciated your husband's experience of, needing activities, right? And it's just like stress. The stressors aren't good or bad necessarily. They just is. You just have this, personality, and it's really important that you do the work to find out what works for you.
Right. And there are things. So I think sometimes I tend more to the border collie, but my border collie looks like things that are mentally
interesting,
occupying. So my husband needs to be occupied when we're on vacation. Definitely physically, we need to be doing things. When we're home, a lot of that occupation for both of us comes through things that are more mentally occupying. I love to score sailboat races, which means that I'm just like playing with data. And that makes no sense at all to my husband, how I can spend time. But when I'm doing that, it takes such concentration. I am not thinking about anything else. So that's the real key is what is the activity that is going to allow you to disconnect. And you got the super bonus activity. So if you can find something that allows you to disconnect from the stressor and is a signal to let that cortisol come out. So an exercise, that is like a super bonus activity.
Yeah, absolutely. It works for me really well. Well, thank you so much for sharing all these strategies. I'd love to leave our audience and viewers with just one thing that they can do. I know we talked about some things they can definitely do today to help manage their stress, but if you had to leave them with just one tip or idea or something that they should be thinking about in this conversation about stress, what would it be?
You don't have to change everything to make a difference. A lot of the times we think about wellness or stress management and we think, oh my gosh, I have to change everything in order to make this better. You don't. Small changes can make a big difference. And just starting with something, making a commitment to say, I am just going to do this one thing every day for a week, that can make a huge difference.
That's great. Thank you so much. So everybody, Stress Proof Your Life on sale from major retailers, wherever books are sold, February 2nd. Make sure to get a copy of this. We're so excited about it. It's really going to change lives. So definitely get your copy. And thank you so much, Eliz, for joining us today.
My pleasure.